Today's talk is titled, It Really Happened, a monumental historic milestone for the Indigenous leadership and ocean conservation, to be delivered by P.J. Webb. Margaret Webb is a semi-retired public interest attorney dedicated to marine conservation, wildlife advocacy, and environmental justice. As a driving force behind protecting coastal waters in the gap between Monterey Bay and the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuaries. She has collaborated closely with numerous community organizations, including the Marine Sanctuary Alliance, Santa Lucia chapter of the Sierra Club, EcoSlow, and the Surfrider Foundation. Furthermore, she partnered with Indigenous communities to successfully advocate for the official designation of the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary in Central California. Currently, she serves as the San Luis Obispo County at-large representative alternate on the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary Advisory Council. Welcome, PJ.
Hello again. I'm very excited to be here. I love this group. It's always wonderful to talk with you. All those words, the alternate at-large representative for the San Luis Obispo County on the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary Advisory Council. For some reason, the federal government, especially through NOAA, which is not the guy with the boat and the animals, it's the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. They like big names. All of the sanctuaries have really long names. So you'll see a lot of acronyms, and that's because we get tired of saying Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary, even though it's very important. I was also the senior advisor for the Chumash campaign. I co-wrote the nomination with, it was the first nomination accepted by NOAA. Oh, I'm supposed to do my clickety-clack. Oh, good, you didn't have to read all that. So this was the first nomination accepted by NOAA from a Native American tribal group, and it focused totally on Chumash and Indigenous culture. A lot of the National Marine Sanctuaries are usually called by the area they're in. For example, Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary Advisory. And it focuses on the culture of Indigenous people. And one of the things we love about this is because having that culture and having the Indigenous communities involved in the resource management of the National Marine Sanctuary brings a whole another universe of important things. By the way, I'll go back real quick. The swordfish was the Chumash logo. Swordfish is one of the important animals relatives. That is not the NOAA National Marine Sanctuary. The co-nominator was the Northern Chumash Tribal Council, which was centered in Los Osos. Los Osos is the home of the Bear Clan. And I know as you go on the back bay, when you take that back bay of Morro Bay, there is a bear statue there, and that is in honor of the Bear Clan. Fred is no longer with us. We got started a long time ago thinking about how do we keep our coast from having offshore oil extraction, exploitation, drilling. And there's a lot of ways to protect from drilling, but they can be very long and very complicated. One of the mechanisms that has worked very well in keeping out offshore oil drilling is a national marine sanctuary. And so far, it's kept being a very strong reason to prohibit offshore oil drilling. As many of you may know, right now, the administration wants to go and start doing more offshore oil drilling. So far, the courts have kept the prohibition of oil drilling in national marine sanctuaries strong and powerful. So Fred and I sat down and we said, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I said, well, National Marine Sanctuary is a pretty good idea. And he said, oh, yeah, and we could focus on the culture of the indigenous people. And I said, yeah, let's try it. So we were also helped very much by Andrew Christie, who used to live in Cambria. He is Sierra Club of Santa Lucia. So, and then we started doing outreach to the indigenous clans, and we had an amazing response of people really wanting to do this. So it's been a fun trip. So this is a very difficult slide for you to see, but it's talking about the environmental significance of the Chumash National Marine Sanctuary area. This place is amazing. It deserves this protection. Geographically, it includes the Santa Lucia Bank, which has an uplift to 400 meters below the surface of the ocean, and it goes down to 3,000 meters for Arguello Canyon. Arguello Canyon has 5 fingers. If you see all those little lines down there, where the persistent upwelling. And this is also a place where the northern current comes down, the southern current comes up, and it swirls around there at Point Conception. So you've got the north-south and the east-west combining. And what that means is there's an amazing amount of upwelling, which the currents bring up from the cold, deep area, nutrients. So we have northern species of animals and plants meeting with southern species, so there is a diversity of marine life there that is so important. It has, and it's actually of worldwide significance. There's 13 species of whales and porpoises, large numbers of birds and fishes, and where those species overlap, it's just amazing. If there was an oil spill or anything like that, there would be so much damage. And the Chumash knew this, because Point Conception is their most sacred place. They knew that was there. And I'm sorry, I know that map is a little hard to see, but if anybody wants the PowerPoint, I'll send it to you. The Chumash designation timeline, I took 5 slides that had every step, and I said, this is ridiculous, I'm just gonna do just the mean, lean ones. So in 1969, Santa Barbara had an oil spill. I'm sure many of you see heads nodding. Yeah, you remember how that was. And so in 1972, what happened was that Santa Barbara oil spill brought the passage of the National Marine Sanctuaries Act. So in 1972, we began to be able to have national marine sanctuaries. Let's go forward. 18 years later, Leon Panetta introduced a bill to designate national marine sanctuaries in California. 10 years later, this whole thing takes a long time, in 2000, the management plan for Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary, there was a lot of public outcry saying, let's expand the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary, which was the islands down in the south, and let's make a larger sanctuary, and that didn't happen. And then in 2001, the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary had the same public outcry. Let's expand Monterey Bay Sanctuary south. Monterey Bay Sanctuary ends at the north end of Viscalini Ranch. If you walk the bluff and you come from that side, you will see a National Marine Sanctuary, and it'll show you the map of Monterey. And right out from that map is a bench and a rock, and that's the end of the Monterey Bay Sanctuary. We're lucky to have at least part of Cambria protected by that. So 43 years later, the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary nomination was submitted, and it was approved by NOAA. And we were really happy because our first nomination was not approved. So we had to go back and rewrite it. So sanctuaries take a long time. This one took 43 years. So the current status is we are designated. I've been here a lot of times talking about it's really important that we get this designated. Well, I'm happy to say we're designated. It was designated November 30th, 2024, so we're not quite 2 years old yet. It encompasses one of the largest areas of protected sanctuary waters, over 4,500 square miles. So we're pretty happy about that. And it's really nationally and internationally of great significance because of the environment and the protection. And on top of that, keeping Indigenous communities, languages, and cultures and stories as part of it is really helpful. So this is the map. This is the map. So you will see it starts in Pismo Beach, is the north end. There's that little cutout, which is pretty weird. And then it comes around, it wraps around Point Conception, and you'll see it backs right up to the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary. That western gate, which is so sacred, that's where when people die, they have to go through the western gate. They spend about a week. They don't know they're dead. They haven't figured out what they're supposed to do. And ultimately, they go through the western gate. So we're glad that we got that, even though we didn't get the whole thing. Now, if you notice, Cambria would be above the inn in Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. So there is a gap. And that gap was put there because of the offshore wind farms. And when we did the nomination, we knew that there was a problem with having the national wind farms and that gap. And so I negotiated a clause that said, within a given amount of time, NOAA has got to decide if the wind farms don't go, that they're going to expand and close that gap, because we have migration of amazing species that go through there, and we don't want that open for offshore oil drilling. Well, one of the leases for the offshore wind farms, you may have heard recently, was the administration sold out the leases, gave the leaseholders money. And so we know at least one of those wind farms is not going to happen, but we don't know about the other ones. So we're not sure how that's going to go. So there's always more to be done. One of the things I really appreciate, we're only a year and some months, almost 2 years, from just starting. So now we're standing up the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. The offices, fortunately for us, are down in Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. So we have leadership down here, there's staff, and there is a Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary Advisory Council. My primary, who represents here the San Luis Obispo County, is Carol Woodruff, who many of you may know. She is the policy person for Senator John Laird. And she's very powerful and very good and very connected. And so when you have concerns, you can contact her or me, and we will carry your concerns to the sanctuary. NOAA made the commitment to the Indigenous communities that they would share the expertise, resources, and capabilities of NOAA, not the guy with the boat and the animals, and tribes to improve resource management. And I'm proud to say they're doing it. We have several panels of Indigenous communities that are actively a part of standing this up and structuring it. And I really am, I am so excited that NOAA is keeping their commitment, because we do have political things that happen, and fortunately, the current administration doesn't seem to want to do anything outside of trying to stand up oil and gas exploitation out. So far, they haven't noticed that we have diversity and inclusion. And they're building on Indigenous knowledge, experience, and perspectives. When you have people who have lived here for possibly 15,000 years, they learn a lot. And they learn a lot about what to do with the land and the ocean. So NOAA is doing that. And involving the community and respecting it, not just having meetings and listening to them, but having them being so active. I'm so excited because as Fred and I were writing the nomination, we were hoping this would happen. And it also provides substantive involvement for all Indigenous communities, not just federally recognized communities. California has more Native Americans than any other state, and an overwhelming number of them are not federally recognized. And one of the reasons for this is because when California became a state in 1850, Washington, D.C. had no clue. They made California a state because of the gold rush, and they wanted to get their hands on some of that. So they didn't know how to figure out who was a native and who wasn't. The missions had records. They were good at record keeping. And so the tribes and the clans and families who were allied and close to missions became federally recognized. And those who weren't were not federally recognized. And many of the Chumash were coastal, and they were not close to a mission, and they were a pretty independent group. There was the Chumash Rebellion of 1824, and they didn't want to be slaves to the mission. Some of the missions have underground jails where they kept the Native American men overnight and then let them out to work for them as slaves. And there was also massacres of a lot of Indigenous people in California. So I really appreciate that a federal agency like NOAA and National Marine Sanctuaries includes non-federally recognized tribes. The federally recognized, there's arguably 9 bands of Chumash. One band, which is Saint Inez, which is a mission, they are the federally recognized. All the other bands and clans are not federally recognized. So NOAA is really doing a great job of stepping up with their commitment to the Indigenous communities. So I'm going to get into a little bit to what does a sanctuary protect. And these are the protections that are in the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. It prohibits offshore oil and gas exploration, development, and production. And you'll see there are little exceptions. There's always exceptions. But offshore exploration is actually more destructive than people understand. Because in order to find where oil is under the ocean, talk with my hands, under the ocean floor, you have to do seismic acoustic, basically blasting, because you have to go beneath the bottom of the ocean. And that kills generations of fish eggs, it kills plants, it kills animals. It's very, very destructive. And then when you think about, well, when they find it, then they start drilling, and they're going to have to build, cable or oil pipelines into the land. And as we know, not just the 1969 Santa Barbara oil spill, we had a Sable, which was the Exxon sold a pipeline to Sable, and it's north of Santa Barbara. And that was a pipeline of offshore oil, but it was on the land where it started leaking. That's been pretty recently. So it can be so destructive. Other things that it prohibits unauthorized take or possession of marine mammals, sea turtles, and birds. So it protects the wildlife, even if the wildlife is a bird that isn't in the ocean. It does not allow disturbing sanctuary submerged lands. Now, sanctuaries have this thing about shipwrecks. We got a bunch of them here. We have one of the worst shipwrecks that the U.S. Navy has. And not only, I think shipwrecks are interesting and they're a resource, but it also protects the fact that there are villages under that water. Our coastline that we have now is not the coastline we've had. It went out a lot further. I lost your matches.
Yeah.
It goes out a lot further. So there are actually submerged indigenous villages. Some of them are Chumash, and some of them are other indigenous families. As a matter of fact, when they put the pilings in Avila for the Chevron Pier, which is the mile-long pier, which is now a marine science research, the divers found caves underneath the water that had Chumash pottery in them and had archaeological finds. So yeah, it was pretty amazing. It also prohibits discharges or deposits into the sanctuary. What that means is when municipal entities have wastewater, it's a higher level of water quality to go into a sanctuary. So it adds a layer of protection so that the water quality is maintained. And also, cruise ships. While I was on the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary Advisory Council, we found out that cruise ships were discharging human waste untreated. They were discharging, this was back when there were actually dry cleaning clothes for the people on the cruise, and they would discharge their dry cleaning toxic fluids. Yeah, so it got passed for Monterey. The cruise ships cannot dump their effluent when they're in the sanctuary. And what's interesting is it's really easy to enforce that because large ships have to keep computerized ballast. So they have to keep things even. So their computers, all the Coast Guard has to do, which I got to go with them once, they go to the control booth, and they can find out exactly when they dropped the ballast water, and they did it right before they came into the sanctuary. So it does work. Oh, more protections. Disturbing, moving, or removing historic resources. And that's, as I said, shipwrecks and submerged villages. Also, attracting sharks. There is one exception, and has to be highly specialized and permitted for certain researchers, but chumming for a shark is not allowed. Deserting a vessel. If you guys have been in Estero Bluffs, right before you get to Cayucas, there's a boat there. It ran ashore. It's still there. If it was in a sanctuary, it would have been cleaned up and gone. Introducing or releasing into the sanctuary and introduced non-native species. We've had trouble with, and this comes in sometimes in the ballast of ships. We've had the Egyptian mussels and all the different things. When they come in and they're non-native, they don't have the predators that they had where they came from. So that can be very dangerous. and special protections for resources from Rodriguez Seamount. I love Rodriguez Seamount. It's amazing. It's in the south end. It's off of Santa Barbara. It is 42 miles offshore. It was once an island. The ocean was lower, and it was an island. And now the top of Rodriguez Seamount is 2,000 feet below the surface of the ocean. And it is 5,000 feet above the seafloor. It's a heck of a mountain. And seamounts are incredibly special environments because of the difference in how deep they are. There's so many species on there. And when you have a national marine sanctuary, there's more research. Because a lot of granting of research money, they get like 5 points extra on the scale if they're in a sanctuary. So they're discovering new species, all kinds of new species on Rodriguez Seamount. Now we have our own seamount, which was very easy to cover with national marine sanctuaries, and we did this about, I'm gonna say, about 10 years ago. And it slid in, it wasn't controversial. It's out there, 90 miles from Cambria, and I think it is 90 miles. You know, after too many numbers. I'm not good at numbers. But they have found that there is an echo effect that comes up from Davidson Seamount, and it means that even though the seamount is so far beneath the surface of the ocean, there are more marine mammals, there's more whales, there's more fish, and there's more birds. So it just creates this effect and is just filled with all kinds of new species. One of the species they found on Davidson Seamount is an anti-cancer chemical. It's a sponge. And so the things that they find are just, it's amazing how valuable that is. Okay, so we're getting near the end. It ain't over. We're not in the sanctuary. If you live south of the north end of Fiscalini, we're not in the sanctuary. And it doesn't appear that the wind farms are making any traction. And so we need to close that gap because we've got this migration that comes down that is filled with marine mammals and fish and birds. And then we have this area that is just, I don't know, you fall over the edge. So we asked NOAA to make sure and create a review of our gap. And I wanted a time, a date. And so they first said 2027, then they said 2028. So now they're saying 2032. So in 2032, NOAA's they're going to consider expanding the sanctuary or designating a new sanctuary. Did you need 43 years it took us to get this one? I don't want to take 43 years to finish that. So we're talking about expanding Monterey down to where Shumash begins, or from Shumash up to where Monterey begins, because expansion is much easier than establishing a new sanctuary. So, and this is the hard part. If new data demonstrates that significant living marine, submerged maritime heritage and cultural resources in this area, if this area would benefit from those protections, NOAA could consider expanding. Could consider. So, despite the fact we got them to make a promise, they could consider. The biggest problem with this is, in order to expand or to do a new sanctuary, you have to prove that national marine sanctuaries have sufficient money to be able to manage that and do the expansion. Well, they don't have enough money to even deal with the ones they have. So this is an iffy thing. So it ain't over. And this is my thank you. We're gonna keep pushing. And so I'm looking forward to saying, yeah, we have the whole migratory path protected. So thank you, and I appreciate your attention and giving me the time to do this. I love this group. I call you UUs. I get to go see the UUs. So now we're going to show you a video that's going to show you parts of the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary that you have never seen, and some that you have. So Julie?